Okay, let's unpack this. Cell factories. I mean, it sounds like pure science fiction, doesn't it? You've got these microorganisms working like tiny, super efficient production lines.
It really does, but it's absolutely real.
Yeah, and it's already starting to reshape our food system using precision fermentation to produce these complex functional ingredients. It's incredibly exciting.
But also at the same time, one of the most controversial areas in biotech right now. It creates this fascinating tension.
Exactly. You've got this incredible technological promise on one side.
Yeah.
And then consistently undercut by, significant public skepticism and industry caution too, actually.
And that skepticism, that's really what we're diving into today. We're synthesizing the key insights from the Be Trust Project's Masterclass, the one focused on co-creating trust cell factories. The core question, it seems simple, but it's so critical. What does it actually take to build, and maybe more importantly, earn consumer trust for these complex, kind of novel innovations? And this isn't just an academic question, is it? This work is fundamental to the larger Be Trust project.
Right. Funded by the EU Horizon Europe program.
Exactly. And that project is specifically designed to develop a more inclusive way, a governance model to try and overcome these twin challenges. The public distrust and the industry hesitation towards, well, the whole bioeconomy.
It's not just about the science, then.
No, not at all. It's almost like social engineering meets biotech.
And for this deep dive, we've pulled together some fantastic sources for you. We've got expertise on consumer behavior from places like Aarhus University.
Insights from companies navigating this very shift. Traditional players like Ovodan Biotech moving into the space alongside pioneers like Novonesis.
Plus, and this is really interesting, real-time reports from recent co-creation workshops. They held these with citizens in Denmark and Belgium.
Yeah, getting that direct public voice. So whether you're someone trying to innovate in the food space, or maybe you're just curious about what might be on your plate in, say, 5 years.
Understanding these social and emotional sides of biotech acceptance is, well, it's essential.
Absolutely. Let's start with the psychology, maybe, the barriers that immediately pop up.
Okay, so what's really fascinating is that these novel foods, and anything from cell factories definitely counts, they seem to trigger this immediate higher level of scrutiny, like an automatic defense mechanism kicks in.
That's precisely it. Professor Liisa Lähteenmäki from Aarhus University, her research really highlights this. When consumers encounter something new like this, they immediately ask 3 core questions.
Which are?
Number 1, is it safe? Always. Then, is it natural? And perhaps the trickiest one for innovators, is it necessary? Do we actually need this?
That second one, is it natural? That feels like the biggest hurdle for something made in, a bioreactor. How do you even begin to tackle that deep-seated idea that natural always equals good?
Well, the research shows something really important here. The skepticism isn't just because people lack technical information. If it were that simple...
Scientists could just throw more data at them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Problem solved. But it's not about that. The skepticism is rooted much deeper in values, in emotions, in sort of worldviews. So if a technology challenges what you fundamentally believe about how food should be produced, just giving more data often backfires. It can actually solidify opposition.
Okay, so that explains why the standard approach, the sort of information dump, usually fails. It's not a data transfer problem.
No, it's a dialogue problem. It's about shared values and, crucially, trust. Not just facts.
So what does work then? What are the conditions for acceptance?
It's less about the specifics of the tech and more about the context surrounding it. Consumers are generally far more accepting when, firstly, they see a clear benefit.
Benefit to themselves, like health or cost or society?
Both, actually. It could be personal benefit or a societal one like sustainability or animal welfare. Secondly, they need to understand the production process, but in a simple, transparent way. No jargon.
Okay.
And thirdly, critically, they have to trust the actors behind it all. The companies, the scientists involved, the regulators overseeing it.
But isn't that the unique communication challenge with cell factories? The whole process involves microorganisms, bioreactors. It's often described as, like, invisible or really abstract.
That's a great point.
If you can't easily visualize it, like looking through a factory window and seeing something familiar, how do you explain it clearly without using technical terms that might actually erode trust?
That is the absolute crux of the linguistic challenge, isn't it? Which brings us neatly to the role of language and framing. How we talk about it matters a lot.
Right. Acceptance isn't fixed. It can shift quite dramatically based on how it's introduced, the media coverage, and the specific framing used in communication. Professor Lähteenmäki's work showed this really clearly, this linguistic difference.
Absolutely. They found certain words just trigger suspicion. For instance, language suggesting absolute control or design.
Like designer yeast.
Exactly. That kind of thing tends to raise far more apprehension than terms highlighting concepts like efficiency or sustainability or resource saving.
Okay, so let's make that concrete for people listening. Instead of saying, we use controlled design to engineer a specific yeast strain to create this protein, what's the better way?
You might frame it as, we're using a highly efficient fermentation process that, say, saves 90% of the water and land compared to traditional protein production.
So you shift the focus from the potentially unsettling abstract process
to a tangible, positive outcome for society or the environment. It reframes the whole thing.
That's a huge strategic insight, and this isn't just theoretical, is it? Companies are living this right now, like Ovodan Biotech.
Yeah, that's a fascinating example. A company traditionally rooted in, large-scale dried egg products.
And now they're making this strategic move into precision fermentation. Jakub Kaczmarek, their head of R&D, he really emphasized that trust is just central to this whole evolution for them.
For Ovodan, they realized they couldn't just quietly pivot. They have to be proactive. They have to be transparent.
How so?
Well, they need to clearly explain what they're doing using microbial fermentation to produce specific functional proteins, the kinds they used to get from eggs, but crucially, doing it without needing animals.
And Kaczmarek flagged something else, a detail that seems small, but is apparently critical for acceptance for many consumers.
What was that?
He said industry leaders must communicate clearly that the GMOs, the genetically modified organisms used in the production process.
The yeast or microbes themselves.
Exactly. That they are removed in the final product.
Okay. So the use of GMOs as processing aids the yeast strain, perhaps that's potentially acceptable.
But only if the final food ingredient contains 0 remnants of that modified organism. Why is that specific detail such a tipping point?
It seems to come down to classification and, importantly, labeling. If the final ingredient contains no living modified organism or even detectable modified DNA sometimes, it kind of bypasses some of that deep-seated resistance people have towards eating genetically modified food.
Right. It's a crucial distinction, isn't it? Using biotech as a tool versus the end product being a GMO.
And communication has to make that line absolutely crystal clear. It's a nuance that matters hugely.
So when the technical language itself becomes a barrier, a psychological hurdle,
the solution seems to be robust, benefit-driven storytelling. Kaczmarek really stressed this. The conversation has to shift to the why.
Why are we doing this?
Exactly. Talking about food security or reducing the carbon footprint, creating more stable supply chains, that shifts the consumer's question from, what on earth is this weird product?
So, okay, why is this important for the planet or for my future?
Precisely. It reframes the necessity question we mentioned earlier.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But it feels like that brings us beyond just the interaction with the consumer. If language and framing are half the battle, where's the other half? It sounds like we need to talk about trust across the whole system, the entire value chain.
We absolutely do. Marlene Boiesen, who's the commercial lead at Novonesis, and they're a major global player in enzymes, microbial solutions.
Right.
She emphasizes that trust can't just stop at the supermarket checkout. It has to be built right across the entire value chain. You're talking investors, regulators, retailers, and, really importantly, the internal employees.
That internal alignment point is really key, isn't it? If the company's own people, the ones selling the product or developing it, don't genuinely understand or trust the mission internally,
that external communication just going to fall flat. It'll lack authenticity. Employees are, in effect, the company's ambassadors.
They have to be. And Novonesis, they seem to get that transparency and simplicity need to go hand in hand.
Yes. The industry needs to communicate not just what the technology does, using enzymes, microbial fermentation, but connect it to the why.
Yeah.
How does this fit into broader societal goals?
Like hitting key reduction targets or creating more resilient food systems?
Exactly. It's about showing how the innovation is part of the solution to bigger systemic problems people actually care about.
And they don't try to build that credibility entirely on their own, which seems smart. Novonesis, you mentioned, prioritizes collaboration with external partners, like universities and NGOs. Why bring outsiders in?
Well, partly to stress test their own assumptions, get different perspectives, but also, crucially, it brings third-party credibility to their messaging.
Ah, okay.
Think about it. If a company only talks about its own benefits, you might remain skeptical, right? But if public research institutions or, say, mission-driven environmental NGOs validate the process or the societal goal,
The perceived risk drops. It feels less like just corporate spin.
precisely, it adds a layer of objective validation.
So trust isn't just some peripheral marketing exercise you bolt on at the end.
Not at all. It's a foundational condition for this kind of biotech to succeed and actually scale up. It requires long-term, deliberate commitment from everyone in the chain. That includes policymakers, too, setting that inclusive framework.
Which leads us perfectly into the real-world feedback loop,
Mhm.
those co-creation workshops that the B-Trust project ran.
Yes. Let's get into what the citizens actually said.
Susanne Baden Jørgensen from Food and Biocluster Denmark. She shared the findings from these deliberative workshops they held in Denmark and Belgium. And this wasn't just a quick online poll, was it?
No. The goal was really to understand the underlying values and emotions shaping opinions through quite deep reflective dialogue.
So what were the main takeaways from those conversations with citizens?
Well, insight number one really confirms what we were just discussing. That naturalness barrier. It's still very strong.
How did that come across?
Participants expressed, significant discomfort when the food production was described very technically microorganisms in bioreactors. One person apparently noted that seeing a complex diagram of machinery just made them feel uneasy, like the process was too far removed from traditional food. Too clinical, perhaps?
But did their opinion shift at all during the discussion?
It did. But interestingly, only when the conversation pivoted. The emotional shift seemed to happen quite quickly when the same process was framed differently in terms of precision or resource efficiency or animal welfare benefits.
So again, it's that shift from the abstract process to the tangible outcome that makes the difference.
It seems to be the key emotional trigger, yes. Another crucial point Susanne raised speaks directly to that governance piece we touched on, regulatory clarity, or rather, the lack of it.
People are confused.
Profoundly confused, apparently, about the safety assessment process, how it works, and crucially, who is actually doing the assessing? Who's the watchdog?
And that lack of visibility, that just creates an immediate trust deficit, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But the positive side was, when they explained the regulatory pathways simply and transparently, the steps involved, the body's responsible, the level of rigor, people's comfort levels increased significantly.
Wow. So just explaining, the governance clearly built trust almost immediately.
It seemed to. And Insight 3 really confirmed what the industry leaders like Kaczmarek and Boiesen were grappling with. Who you trust matters. Intensely.
How so?
While skepticism spikes when biotech is associated mainly with large, faceless corporations, but trust tends to increase when the solutions are linked to public research institutions or collaborative innovation projects, or maybe smaller mission-driven startups.
It's the perceived motivation, isn't it? Profit versus purpose.
Exactly. It's almost a David versus Goliath perception applied to food innovation.
Uh-huh.
People are clearly asking, okay, whose hand is actually holding the lever here? Who benefits most?
But perhaps the most powerful takeaway from these workshops, the one that really stood out, was about timing. The timing of this dialogue.
Yes. This is
Yeah.
critical for any innovator, I think.
The citizens were incredibly clear on this point. They said, people want to be asked early, during the development process itself, not presented with a finished product just before it hits the shelves.
They want input, not just information after the fact.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And they demand that their concerns, their questions, their values be treated seriously, not just dismissed as, irrational fears or resistance from people who don't understand the science.
That really sums up the whole ethos of the Be Trust project, doesn't it? Trust has to be co-created through genuine two-way dialogue. It can't be engineered behind closed doors and then sort of sold to the public as a done deal.
Right. That early engagement allows the innovation process itself to adapt to societal values, rather than ending up fighting against them later on down the line.
It's about building with the public, not just for them.
So, wrapping this up, what does all this mean for the future of cell factories?
Well, it seems the experts we heard from and the citizens in those workshops, they actually agree on the fundamentals. Building trust is fundamentally about engaging people genuinely. It's about sharing responsibility, creating space for real dialogue, and doing it before you get to market launch. It's about co-creation, not just brilliant engineering. And if we connect that back to the bigger picture, the B-Trust project aims to use these very insights to help build that more inclusive governing model we talked about, to help the EU overcome that low public acceptance, that industry reluctance.
And unlock the potential.
Exactly. Unlock the full potential of biotechnology for what could be a more sustainable EU bioeconomy. This deep dive really shows us the practical steps needed. Things like radical transparency, being mindful of language, and that crucial early engagement.
It's powerful stuff. And here's something, maybe, for you to think about. If public acceptance can shift so dramatically based just on whether a technology is described as resource-saving versus controlled design, how much of our perception of any innovation is shaped purely by the subtle words we choose? And how much is truly rooted in the underlying science itself? Is the frame actually more powerful than the fact sometimes?
That's a fascinating question to ponder. The future of food might indeed depend less on what happens in the lab and more on the lexicon we use to describe it.
Something to definitely mull over. This deep dive was based on the Masterclass series from the B-Trust project, which is funded by the European Union's Horizon Europe program.
And if you want to learn more about the B-Trust project and its ongoing work on inclusive innovation, you can visit the B-Trust forum online.
Absolutely. And if you're a policymaker, a researcher, or an innovator working in biotech, stick with us. Building trust is definitely a journey, and we're really just getting started.